So today is an extremely special day. I am so honored and excited to have this important conversation with Susan O'Sullivan, VP US DE&I for Ingram. Susan, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Sheryl. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course, we had the opportunity to speak a little bit before we went live, and you have so many gold nuggets of wisdom to share. I can't wait to jump in. But
Good.
before we do, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit either what or who inspired you, because I know that it's been a journey getting up to, having the impact and the influence that you have today. But maybe it hasn't always been as smooth, and maybe you've had some lessons along the way. And I would also love to know either who or what experiences kind of inspired you in the first place.
Yeah. So I think the inspiration that I had growing up, I was very lucky. I had wonderful parents, and my father was my role model. He was such a hard worker, and he was brilliant. He was a blue collar worker, but he was able to do things from an engineering standpoint that, from a man that was unschooled, it was really impressive. He was an iron worker, but more of a rigger. And the story that I remember the most, like there's certain things that he taught me that, remain, like don't die standing still. He had a little bit of military background. So that's something I always think I'll always make a decision versus not making a decision, because that's just the easiest thing to do. But I remember I was really young, and I'll shorten the story, but my grandmother was moving. My parents had finally been able to help her buy her first home. She had raised 4 children by herself. And when she was moving, the landlord was somebody my dad had worked with. And my dad was the person that he was the one that would build the teams, right? He could go and pick people that were going to be on his crew when they were taking these massive machines in and out of buildings. And this gentleman, my father wasn't there at the time, and this gentleman said some really horrible things about my father, like brown nose or this. And I was so offended and just angry. But, it was children are seen, not heard. So I couldn't say anything. And I was in the living room, and I was so angry, and I was crying. And my father walks in, he goes, "Sweetheart, what's the matter?" I said, "Daddy, you don't believe this man just said all these horrible things about you. And what are you going to do?" And he said, "What am I going to do? I'm not going to do anything. Because right now, that man showed me his true colors. So, sweetheart, he's never going to work on any of my teams. So probably he'll never get a job in this company again." And I was just like, oh, and he was just like this, very, didn't talk a lot, always said great things. So what I learned from that is never speak ill about people to make yourself look better, right? And that's what that gentleman was doing. He was just trying to make himself look like a big deal. So never speak of ill of people to make yourself look better. Always be the person that someone wants on your team, because like I said, my father would get these like the best jobs in the company, like the most difficult and really the most challenging, and he could personally pick whoever was on that team. And I always thought, oh, I want to be the person that's going to be picked. So make sure you're collaborative, make sure you're a hard worker, make sure you're a little bit different, right? You're differentiating yourself. And then the key then, the really, when I started as I got a little older, I'm like, wait a minute, I want to be the leader that gets to pick the people on the teams, right? Because that's where the fun got in. I remember like my dad would get the plans, and he would go through all his people and who would be the best person for this team, because he didn't always pick the same people over and over again. He picked people that were very different from him, and he was always looking to make sure that they could get the job done, because it was safety first, because people died. I mean, that's the crazy thing, people could die. And it was just that lesson of make sure you're picking the right teams. And so that was something that very young made me think very clearly about what I wanted to be as a leader and why I wanted to be a leader. And I think the other thing that really resonates with me as I was going through and building my career, it was, I always had my head down and I was working very hard. But every once in a while, something would happen. And I remember being told, and I was, again, probably a new mom, and I was trying to figure it all out. And I had a new job and a new child and just the whole craziness. And somebody said, "You're good, but you're not anything special." And I was just so taken aback. Like, what do you mean I'm not special? And I got really angry. And then I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what? As a manager, I'm doing a great job, but I'm not doing anything different. I'm not really differentiating myself. And so I started thinking about it. And that's where I really started looking at the job a little bit differently, like everybody else was doing it. And so I started a book club in my work, in my little team, my branch. We would go, even though we were an inside sales organization, I would make sure we went out and we visited customers that were local to us, that we could get that flavor, so that we could understand what they truly wanted. And from learning with that customer, you can then extrapolate it to other customers. So I think the other piece of this was always make sure you're differentiating yourself a little bit from everybody, because if you're all going for the same job, what's going to make you stand out a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. You're reminding me. Well, first of all, your dad was ahead of his time in terms of DE&I. He's like, I don't care where they're from, what they do, what they look like. Let's just look at who's going to get the job done. I'm like, why isn't he leading why didn't he lead a Fortune 500 company? I mean, there's just so much,
Seriously.
wisdom there. And also it reminds me of you and your dad remind me of I'm in the middle of rereading the 4 agreements. And that was
Oh,
the first
yes,
agreement being
yes.
mindful of your words. And so that is, what an amazing role model
I
to
was so
have.
lucky. I was so lucky, Cheryl. And again, my mother was a wonderful woman, but my dad was just, he and I just had a special bond. I was the youngest. He had 2 daughters, and he was such a man's man. But he would take me down to it was a family owned business, and he would let me ride, play on all the big machines. Like they had the cranes and this and that. And I was just the one that was tumbling all over it. And it was just something that I think also sometimes makes me, I was sometimes the only woman in a room. Well, I was always the only little girl at that spot, in that, in that shop or in that yard. So, he was very protective of me, but he also made me not feel like I shouldn't be there, which I think has also been very helpful in my career.
Yeah. So I wanted to pause and just shine some light on that, because one thing we also talked about before we went live, or, there's some things that women are up against that perhaps men are not. And they could be cultural indoctrinations. In other words, what we experience as a young person. Thankfully, what you experienced as a young person is you can come play on the machines. There's going to be all guys in the shop that you're my daughter. You believe, you deserve to be here. So consciously or subconsciously, you're kind of used to being kind of an only in the room. But
Yeah.
sometimes what we experience as younger people, or what we see how our mothers are treated, or the experiences they had, our grandmothers. And so sometimes it makes for a hurdle for women in leadership, or emerging leaders, to get past, even if they conceptually know what to do. So what mindset helped you to keep climbing, and then what mindset would you share with women as they're listening, either female leaders or emerging leaders, if they're thinking, well, I did not have a parent that I didn't really witness that. What mindset did you have, and what might you share with other people listening that might help them from today moving forward?
And I truly believe that there is a lot to be said. If you don't see it, it's hard to believe it, right? And so, especially women of color, anybody, any underrepresented, person, if you don't see yourself, it's really hard to make that leap to say, I don't ever see a woman CEO, or I don't ever see a Black woman CEO. Like, those are hurdles, right? We've got to really, because if you can't see it, it's very hard to conceptualize it. So I think women, we've all been taught, well, I had my father who was very, yeah, sweetheart, come on down. My mother was, not, why are you going to college? Why can't you just go to secretarial school? There's nothing wrong with that. That's what my sister did, but she was like, really trying to hold me back. But I feel that if you've gone to a certain portion of your life, right, and you know what you want, I think that's a big part of it. Know what you want your life to be, right? It's almost like you almost have to, like, if you don't see it, you can't be it. Well, if you don't visualize what you really want your life to be, or what you want to become, it's hard. So really think about, what do you like? Where do you want to go? Because if you don't have that end thought in mind, it could be even just like, what house do I want to live in? What neighborhood do I want to live in? Then you kind of back it up. Well, what do I have to do to get there? I think it's, kind of putting that map, that career map almost out there for yourself. And then say, there's no reason why you can't be that. Now, again, maybe there's, if you're, to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school. If you want to be an attorney, you've got to go to law school. But in the business world, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do? And then you've got to start figuring out your career path from there. And again, if you're, there's a lot, we talked earlier, there's some cultural things. There's people that are going to hold you back, whether you're just brought up in a household where women are, do take the back seat, or you're not allowed to speak. There's a lot of different cultures out there. And it's really making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that are going to help you push you forward. And I really think there's so much to be said about the people you surround yourself with, the voices that you hear. So, now it's amazing. You have podcasts and all these things that you can listen to. What are you listening to that are going to help you really think through what you want to do with your life? Books, there's so many books, there's articles, there's so many things out there right now that can help you really push out of where you might be stuck. And there's a lot of reasons why we can be stuck, but to really to get yourself unstuck, you've got to find people that are going to help you push you through that tribe, almost, that I like to call myself. Like, I have an amazing tribe of women and men, frankly, that surround me, that have always been there to either push me forward when, and I didn't think I could do it, or pick me up when I failed, right? And that pick you up is just as important as that push, because if you don't fail, you're going to fail. If you're really pushing yourself, you're going to fail. So get used to it and find the people that are going to help you ease it. It's never easy to fail. I've done it, more times than I care to think, but it's making sure that you have that person or that tribe that's going to say, okay, pick yourself up. Yep, we'll go have a glass of wine. You can cry, but tomorrow you're going to go get back on that horse and you're going to go do it again.
Mm-hmm. That is so important. I think it was Jim Rohn said you are the, 5 people that you spend the most time with. And and we could always, use more. So even thinking about what you just said, thinking of who is someone that I know that I can spend more time with. You're like, can I get on the phone to that person? I mean, me putting on my coaching hat for a second. I'm like, let's take that gold nugget and put it into action, and maybe you're like, I don't know anyone. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, who in your organization can you call? Can you start a group, kind of like you did? And I would like to extrapolate that on a little bit, because as we surround ourselves with supportive people that push us outside our comfort zone, or ready to pick us up when we fall, it's also important to start limiting our time with I call them the crabs in the bucket. Have you ever put crabs in the bucket? One tries to crawl out, excuse me. The other one pulls it down. I have a quote in my garage. They're all over. I've brainwashed my kids for years, but one of them says something like, do not lower your ambitions because it makes someone else uncomfortable. And so I think it's also important to take stock of, obviously, family members, friends. You're not going to kick them to the curb. No. However, you may distance yourself a little bit and choose to turn up the dial on the people that you were talking about, and maybe turn down the volume a little bit on the folks that sometimes we also talked about, sometimes are trying to protect you, but the reality is they're trying to protect themselves. And so being aware of both types of people, I think, can be super important. And what you were talking about, being really proactive about spending more time finding these people, creating a group if you don't have one, I could not agree with you more.
Oh, it's so important, because again, to your point, Sheryl, many of the people that are going to be your distractors, they're doing it, to your point, out of love. Like, I don't want to see you get hurt. I don't want to see you having to work so hard. I don't want to see you on planes and putting, danger. And it's like, it all came from my mother's good heart. Don't get me wrong, but it was limiting. And the more that I talked with people that were moving forward, it's just empowering. And then again, you're going to have your bad days. It's find the people that are going to let you vent, but then say, what are you going to do tomorrow? Okay, let's keep moving. Like, you've got to have that, that group of friends that just says, you're wonderful. You can go do it. Go do it. Yes, you had a bad day today. You'll be fine tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And so let's move that forward into the title of the session, really building innovative and profitable teams. What's not part of the title is during these disruptive times or during the different economy. I mean, there was, during COVID, there were actually many companies where COVID actually fueled their business. I mean, there were plenty that it didn't, but sometimes, or at least there's some examples where it actually inflated numbers, inflated sales, and now the same benchmarks are being held. Beat the numbers, beat the numbers. And then it's very difficult to perform under pressure, perform under stress, perform when the economy's turning and maybe a partner loses their job. There's all these extraneous things happening inside and outside of the business. And so, can you share some wisdom around making sure and keeping teams to make sure that they're innovative and profitable, even during when times are a little bit disruptive as they are now?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I think how you select your team is incredibly important. And I really mean that because when I think of how especially leadership teams, you have you, right? So you know what you're good at, you know what you're bad at. And so I know if anyone, knows me, this is my mantra. Find people that are going to complement your weaknesses. Find people that are going to push you out of your comfort zone, because we all know that there are people out there that could potentially be better than we are. And if you're doing a good job finding these people, you're doing all the right things, but they can be really scary. Find people that are going to challenge your ideas, and understand, frankly, that you're the ultimate decision maker, but you want to make sure that you're creating an environment where everyone feels like they belong, but that they can truly bring their thoughts and ideas and their true self to the table and talk through the biggest transformations that are going on right now, or the smallest transformations, because it all makes for a better business. The more that we can have those really open dialogues about how we can do things differently, how we can look at situations differently, the better off we're going to be. I would say if you find people that really scare you, you are doing the right thing and that you should hire them. I also, once you get that team, I think the most important thing is you need to make sure that you're continuing to train them. And again, training doesn't have to be a formal, you hire people in or your training group. It can be just making sure that you're giving them articles. We are living in the world where you can get, literally a master's degree just by watching TED Talks and doing all the, reading and podcasts. There's so much amazing information. Send them to your teams, right? Ask them to what their thoughts are about it. And maybe not even just your team. Go 2 steps lower. Get other people's ideas, because that's where you're going to start seeing those emerging leaders, because maybe not all of your managers are really progressive. And so maybe they're taking somebody that doesn't quite, they're going to say they're just not quite fitting the team, but they're the person that has the gems of the idea. So really making sure that you're getting everybody's input. So make sure you're training them, make sure you're rewarding great behavior. When somebody does bring something wonderful or a nugget, make sure you're really just rewarding that and recognizing it. And so that people start understanding that, oh, this really is an environment that I can say things that may sound stupid, but they're going to get to your point, they're going to grab that nugget out of it, right? That I feel like I can really, maybe for every 5 stupid ideas, one great one happens, but I'm comfortable giving those 5 bad ones. I mean, that's the kind of environment that you get, because then once you have that, oh my gosh, then profitability comes. And let's be very honest, we're all here for profitable business, right? That's the reason why is in business. We're not a non-for-profit. So if you hire the right people and you go out there and you find different, so if you're going to the same colleges, and yes, it's wonderful to bring people that are athletes, because they've got that drive. And I know that's what you studied, but it can't be the same lacrosse team over and over and over again, right? It's like, go find different sports people, then go find different ideas, because the more that you look differently. But I would also say, if you have 2 athletes, go find a data cruncher, go find an account, right? You need people that can really balance that team in different perspectives, in different ages, and different, thoughts and cultures, because that's truly going to make that team incredibly strong. Because diversity isn't just about our gender or our race or our ethnicity or how we identify. It really is also about, it's all those things, but it's our experiences, it's even just how we represent and what we think. So I'm on a bit of a soapbox on that one, but it really is that if you bring those teams together in the right way, it can just be an absolute gold mine for the company.
Yeah. And so, if you don't mind elaborating on that for a minute, because I think sometimes when it comes to having D&I initiatives, there are some box checkers. And by that meaning, okay, we have this percentage, we're good. But so it's almost as if maybe, how would you advise an emerging leader
Mhm.
who really is passionate about this, but she's having a little bit of a tough time getting buy-in? I mean, what's the most benefit to the business, or a way that she could help explain and push the initiative through, so it's not just making sure there's equal numbers, or so just to really influence up, so there could really be some change.
Oh, and, the research abounds, right? So we know that if I'm going to take numbers off the top of my head, but um, if you have a diverse leadership team, you are going to have 40% higher profits. If you have diverse teams in general, you're going to make decisions 65% faster. I mean, you can go find the research, and all you need to do is just Google anything. And there are so many studies out there, and the numbers may be off here and there, but the numbers are all going to correlate, right? So right there, the more diverse you're going to find your teams are going to be made, the better off the company is going to be. I would also, you're probably going to get pushback. Well, it's going to be a lot harder to bring them into the organization. I think that's probably the biggest pushback. Yes. And I will always tell you, it may take you longer to do an onboarding. It may take them a little bit longer to come into the organization. It may take you more touch points, but a year later, you're going to be so much better off. I have never seen a situation where the more work you put in on the front end, the better off you're always going to be on the back end. So it's the same thing. If you can find something that's really easy, fits in, jumps into that role, they're going to be good, but they're never going to give you what you need at the very, very end. And so I think it's saying that, yes, I'm more than welcome. I'm more than happy to do the extra work to bring the people on, because I know, and the studies prove it, that we'll be better off in the long run. So
Mhm.
you can certainly make the case just on the data alone. And then I think you, just as the leader or as an emerging leader, just have to really double down and say, I can do this and I can make this work. And also, there's people that you can ask for help all the time. And there's so many people out there that you can ask for help, even just to craft that conversation, right? That's where you go back to your tribe. Like, I really want to do this. How do I go? How do I approach this with my manager? Or you go to your mentor. And I would also say, make sure, as any emerging leader, and especially women, get a mentor, and then find somebody that's going to actually be your sponsor, right? Those are just basics, allyship,
Mhm.
sponsorship, because you need somebody that's going to say, you know what, you may not be in the room, but they're going to say, she's brought all these great ideas. Let's let her do this one. I think it's there, and I'll help her. I think those
Mhm.
are really critical things. Get somebody else that's at a higher level on board with you as well, if you can.
Yeah, maybe also make sure they're talking about you when you're not in the room,
Oh,
and
100%.
yeah, all of
100%.
that. And then, I promised I wouldn't throw you a curveball. This might just be a little bit of one, but I'm sure you have a great
Right.
answer. But let's say, if you have either a peer or a subordinate that comes in, that is from a marginalized group,
Mhm.
or they may feel like an only or a double only. What is the one thing? I know there's probably many, but early on, what is the number one thing that can make them feel included, even if they don't look or feel in their mind initially like everyone else? What is something that we as peers or as leaders can do?
Okay, I know this is going to sound, you might say, really, that's your answer, Susan? First of all, make sure you say hello. Really,
Mhm.
like, and I know that sounds crazy, but make sure that you say hello. And if you have questions, ask them. That's the crazy thing. Like, how do you like to celebrate? How do you celebrate your birthday? How do you celebrate? What traditions do you celebrate? Right? Just having those very personal conversations. The old remember the old management by walking around? That was that big, everyone like that's the best way. And I truly do think
Mhm.
it is one of the best ways to manage, because if you're not walking around, how do you know what's going on? But when you do that, make sure you stop at that person's office, at their desk, at their workstation, whatever it is, say hello, welcome them, and then make sure you're including them in there. If you're all going out for lunch, are you asking them to go to lunch with you? If something's strange, like you don't understand, ask them, say, look, I hope don't want to be offensive, but I don't understand. Can you explain that? It's so much more. It's like, it's just human nature. If somebody wanted to ask me, why do you have that buffalo there? I'd be more than happy to answer it for you, right? It's like, there's like those silly questions that are always going to get a little bit deeper into who that person is, and maybe give you a better window into their culture or into who they truly are. And that's really where that belonging comes in, and that people feel like, wow, people really do care and they listened to me. And that's wonderful. And maybe now next time I'll when that holiday comes up, I'll notice, say happy whatever it is, because I didn't know you celebrate it and now I do. Like,
Mhm.
those little things really make an amazing difference. Or food. I know food's a big issue. Like, we're actually launching a new ERG, and I was able to talk to some people in Mexico about how they're running their ERGs, and just some great ideas about every country they do of big food, from whether it's Peru or Chile. And it's literally, they'll say, and they actually do a video on how to prepare it. So little things that'll just give you insights into their culture, insights to know that they may feel alone right now, and how can you how do you make them feel like they're part of your tribe or your group?
Yeah, that's such great advice because it's a human drive for us to feel cared for. And
Absolutely.
so that is so important. And maybe if it's hybrid or virtual too, I guess you can just ping them or say, hey, can we have just a 10-minute? I want to say hello. I mean, it might take a little extra work, but
But again, it goes back to, yes, it's going to take a little extra work, but that always pays off in the long run.
yes.
Always pays off in the long run.
100%. So thank you so much for that. And then if you want to leave, just to summarize, if you were going to leave the listeners with a summary or call to action, be sure to do this, just words of wisdom, what would those be?
Absolutely. I think the first thing, whether it's about your career or about the team that you want to create, know what you want, right? Know what you want at the end, right? Kind of understand what your why is. I think that's the most important thing. Why do you want to do this? Why are you working towards this? Really understand what you want. I think the second piece is make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who really are going to push you out of your comfort zone, but also be there when you fall, or be there when you need that extra push, because it truly is the people that you surround yourself with that is so important. Make sure the words that are coming at you are good words. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but again, it goes back to, what are you reading? What are you listening to? Because again, if that is what you're thinking through your day, that's going to make a big difference on how you start seeing things. And what are you doing to elevate yourself a little bit? I think that's really important. So I always ask people, what are they reading? What are you listening to? Because I think it really gives me insights into what they want to do and who they are. And then the last thing, if you do have the ability to select your team, right? Find people that scare you. I think I know my best hire was a gentleman that didn't fit the norm, so to speak. He was not the corporate hair. He was not super tall. He was not that, he was, I had to really fight to hire him. And he gave me a presentation that was so different, so creative, so crazy. And I remember going home thinking, he's brilliant, and he's going to make me look really bad. He's amazing. And I'm embarrassed to say it took me all night for me to realize, oh my God, that's why you have to promote him to this job. This is why he's the right guy for that job. And he's still here. He's still doing amazing things. He's gotten promoted many, many times over. But he still scares me. Like, he's the guy that if I have a question, because I'm not that creative. Like, he's that creative mind. We can have this spitball conversation, and within 20 minutes, I know exactly where I want to go, because he's just that. But he's given me 17 crazy ideas, and the 18th is going to be like, that's exactly what I want. So that's where, if you have that ability, find that person that's just going to really scare you in a good way, and you will always have an amazing team. And frankly, you'll always continue to bring that profitable growth to your company.
That is so, and that takes a lot of courage. I'll just put that out there. So, but it sounds like it's really been a big contributor, at least partially, to your success. And it sounds like a great life lesson. Like, you think of your circle of friends. I just had someone call me that says, "Oh, we're going to Machu Picchu and we're going to have a guided tour up this mountain and we're going to have a Sherpa." And I'm like,
Oh,
I don't have all my friends are not like that. But when you were saying that, it reminded me of her. And I have a great appreciation for someone that says, "Do you want to go jump out of a plane?" Or something like that.
yes,
So I think, in your teams and in your team in life, that seems like it's really super important. So in summary, know your why, surround yourself by amazing people, spend maybe more time with the ones that are amazing, and maybe scale back a little bit on the ones that may either intentionally or unintentionally hold you back. And then be mindful of what's hitting your ears, either what you're watching or listening to, and turn up the dial on the good stuff that's going to lend itself to you being a fearless leader. um, and also select a team that scares you. So thank you so much for sharing this wisdom. A lot of it is very unique. It just is becoming more and more clear, all about why you've done and been able to do some of the amazing things that you've done. And I look forward to continuing to follow your journey.
absolutely. I look forward to it as well. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. And have a wonderful evening.
Okay, thanks.